there are a couple of ways of looking at that. She's thought, well, I wish I had been this person when I was younger. But then the question becomes, were you ready to be that person though when you were younger? Maybe like that really difficult place that you hit in life, that was the thing that you needed in order to turn your life around. In other words, if you hadn't gone through those difficulties, maybe you had gotten this far in life. But because you had those difficulties, as hard as it was, maybe now you're going to get this far in life. Sometimes you have to have those challenges to make yourself better. You know, if you're just kind of like vanilla, then you don't really have an impulse to get better or worse. You're just kind of like there. But then you're never going to find out what you're capable of doing. But they're shutting you off from a really important avenue for dealing with tragedy. And I don't trust people like that, because that means that they want you to wallow in tragedy and be sad and miserable and angry. And if someone's trying to make me angry, it makes me wonder, what are you trying to make me angry for? Like, what do you get out of this? There has to be a purpose for it. And typically people want to make you angry because they want to use your anger in some way. I'm highly suspicious of people who want you to be angry. I know you guys have teachers who want to make you little activists and want to anger you and rile you up. It's a good question to ask yourself. What are they getting out of it? What are they getting out of indoctrinating you to their point of view, their worldview? Why do they want you to be as miserable and angry as they are? Talking to a student this morning as I was walking in here. He's in a different period. He's a very outspoken Christian. And as I was walking up the hall, he said, hey, Scott, did you hear the world's ending? I said, yeah, it kind of always is. I heard about that. And he said, well, it's a good thing. As far as I'm concerned, he said, for me. He didn't mean like to speak like that. As far as I'm concerned, the world can die. He didn't mean it that way. He just said, that's a good thing from my view, but he said, I'm really worried about everybody else around here. I said, then you should go talk to all of them. So I think I will. Because for him, the end of the world is a good thing for as far as his religion's concerned. Yeah. If you were with someone, especially if you were with someone for a while, and like your lives were pretty well intertwined, and you'd always go to certain places together, that place always reminds you of that person, or like a certain smell, or even like a stretch of highway. If you guys were always traveling on the highway together. I'll leave it at that. But you can, what's that?
Is that why there's a lot of suicides on the highway?
There's a lot of suicides on the highway?
Well, like accidents.
But that's actually different from a suicide, man. But yeah, anyway, so there's two ways of seeing that. It can be like, oh, very positive memories. Or it can be, damn it, everything reminds me of that person. All right, people are not disturbed by the things, but by the view we take of them. So I was talking last period about a former student of mine. It's one of the reasons I encourage you guys to hang on to these journals, because after you graduate, no matter what score you get on them, it's a good kind of window back to who you were when you were in 12th grade. If you wrote like almost nothing and you had like 2 sentences and you got like 5 out of 100 on them, cool, hang on to it. And then when you're 25, look back at yourself at who you were when you were 18, and that might do a lot to explain why you are where you are when you're 25. So if you're sitting thinking like, man, life hasn't turned out the way I've wanted it to, go back and look at your journal. What was your score on it? 20 out of 100? Huh. Maybe there's a pattern in my life where when I was 18, I was doing this bare minimum and saying things like, at least this or at least that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean like you deserve it, well, I guess it does, but it doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. But what it can do is it can remind you, this has been a pattern in my life. This is why things are the way that they are. Maybe it gives you a window into the opportunity to turn things around, to become better. I mention that because the student I'm thinking of, she reached out to me a few years ago. She was 25 at the time, so she, it was like 7 years after graduation. We talked a little bit in that interim there, where she had gotten, I was going to say married, wasn't married. She got pregnant, and she had 2 children at that point, same dude, but she made that mistake. He was a musician, and so life hadn't turned out the way that she had wanted it to. So when she reached out to me, it was more of like this, my life has not gone the way I wanted to, it's gone to trash, blah, blah. And I have that perspective where I can look at it and say, yeah, but you're 25. Meaning that you're an adult, but you have lots of opportunity, lots of room to start to make changes in your life. And the thing that caused her to reach out to me was that she looked at her journal from back then. And she said that she realized that when she was writing these things out, she was just bullshitting her way through it. She was just trying to like fill up the page. And she could see where she would add in extra words just to get to the end of the line so she could make the 2 pages, well, the 1 page, so that she could get credit for it. But she also saw once in a while that there was something authentic in what she would say. Pretty rarely, but for the most part, she just did it just to do it. And she said it caused her to think about her life patterns that way. And just thinking like, yeah, I just kind of like kept thinking like, oh, nothing matters, nothing matters, nothing matters. And because she felt like nothing mattered and that everything was just bullshit anyway, she got to this point in life now where all of those nothing matters and everything is just bullshit kind of piled up to where now she was from her perspective, in a really bad place in life. But also pretty neat though was that she said that she could kind of read between the lines, and she remembered herself when she was like sitting there with a friend of hers trying to just hurry up and write these things in the period before they were going to be due, and they're just trying to scribble and get stuff down. And it reminded her of who she was back then in the sense that she had confidence, she had a belief in herself, she had optimism, she was looking forward to a life that she thought was going to be fantastic. And she was trying to figure out how she could, again, be that 18-year-old version of herself. Because if you're down on yourself and if you're pessimistic, if you're depressed, it's very difficult to all of a sudden make things go well for you. So she was trying to reconnect with herself from back then so that she could be that person. And she was saying that she realized she had a couple of ways that she could look at how her life had turned out. And by the way, it hadn't turned out yet. She was only 25. Turned out is usually when you're like 80 or so, 90 or so. But she could look at how her life was going, and a lot of people say like, I want to be better for my kids. And we just kind of say these things, not really understanding what that means or having a plan of how to be better for our kids. But she said it gave her a direction of her life where she thought, you know what, I wouldn't want to show my kids this journal. I wouldn't want to have to tell my kids, oh yeah, I was just kind of bullshitting my way through it just so I could get, a grade. Because ultimately she saw that grade didn't help her where she was in her life. It helped her get a diploma, which she realized she would have gotten anyway. If she had just written what she was really thinking about things, if she had just taken the time to think about something, it would have been just as easy to write down what she was really thinking. In fact, it would have been easier to write down what she was really thinking versus just kind of like making stuff up. It's harder to use your imagination and make stuff up than it is to talk about what you're really thinking. And she was saying that she kind of realized at that point that she wanted to be the person that she could be honest about who she was with her kids and not have to lie about who she was to be a role model. And so she had started to make a bunch of changes in her life. I still talk to her. And her life, surprise, surprise, has done a complete 180. I mean, obviously she still has some of the challenges that she set herself up for earlier, but her life is completely different now than it used to be. And it's because she set herself to be forthright, to do the right things, to be authentic. And a weird thing happens when you do that. All of a sudden, things start going your way. Not always, not 100%, but largely. And it changed her outlook on life. She's more optimistic. When you're optimistic, well then you tend to do better. Not like naively optimistic, but like realistically optimistic. And because in other words, if you believe I can do better, well then you probably will. If you have it kind of cemented in your mind, I can't do better than I'm doing right now, then you're probably not going to. You're probably not going to. And so it gave her, she had the motivation to it, which was, it's not about me, it's about my children. And then because of that, she improved herself so that she could be a positive role model for them, like an actual real one. And then she started doing the things that she thought a role model should be, and then surprise again, the world turned around for her. So there are a couple of ways of looking at that. She's thought, wow, I wish I had been this person when I was younger. But then the question becomes, were you ready to be that person though, when you were younger? Maybe like that really difficult place that you hit in life, that was the thing that you needed in order to turn your life around. In other words, if you hadn't gone through those difficulties, maybe you had gotten this far in life. But because you had those difficulties, as hard as it was, maybe now you're going to get this far in life. Sometimes you have to have those challenges to make yourself better. If you're just kind of like vanilla, then you don't really have an impulse to get better or worse. You're just kind of like there. But then you're never going to find out what you are capable of doing. In the third or fourth quarter, we're going to read an essay from a guy named Viktor Frankl. And in the essay, he mentions somebody who he met who was in an accident, who became quadriplegic, lost the use of all of his arms and legs. He was in a wheelchair. The guy had to like type with his mouth. You know, I can't remember the guy's first name. His last name is long, but he mentions this guy kind of in passing in this essay. And the guy basically says, you know, my neck, I broke my neck, but that didn't break me. Interestingly enough, fast forward, the guy's actually pretty well known today. He's a clinical psychologist. In the use of technology, now he's been able to type other ways, but he's still quadriplegic. But the guy got a PhD in clinical psychology, and he's one of the best known clinical psychologists in the world, writes books and stuff like that. He never would have become that book writing clinical psychologist if he hadn't broken his neck. And so maybe if you were to ask him, would you rather have broken your neck or not, he probably would say he would rather have broken it, but even if not, you don't always get that choice. But what you do have a choice of is how you respond to things. So it's not necessarily the thing that messes us up. Like with death. Yeah, does death suck? Certainly for the people who are left behind. Definitely. But are you disturbed by death, or are you disturbed by the view that you take of it? Because what's the view that we take of it? Why are we sad when someone dies? Because they're not going to be in our life anymore. They're gone. But if you believe that you're going to see them again someday, or if you kind of leave that opportunity open, either spiritually or physically, like you're going to run across them later on, this might not bother you so much. You know, 9/11, is it funny or is it tragic? Yes, because one of the ways in which we deal with tragedy is through humor. That's why dark humor is so important. This is why people come along and say you can't joke about this, or you shouldn't make fun of that, or not make fun of, but joke about that. Well, then those are people who are trying to, maybe probably not even realizing it, but they're shutting you off from a really important avenue for dealing with tragedy. And I don't trust people like that, because that means that they want you to wallow in tragedy and be sad and miserable and angry. And if someone's trying to make me angry, it makes me wonder, what are you trying to make me angry for? Like, what do you get out of this? There has to be a purpose for it. And typically people want to make you angry because they want to use your anger in some way. If you're laughing about things, if you're joking about things, it's not as easy to use a person like that. And so I'm highly suspicious of people who want you to be angry, which I know you guys have teachers who want to make you little activists and want to anger you and rile you up. It's a good question to ask yourself. What are they getting out of it? What are they getting out of indoctrinating you to their point of view, their worldview? Why do they want you to be as miserable and angry as they are? There's a reason for it. Figuring out what it is. And in their minds immediately, they probably don't think, I want to use them. They're probably just thinking, I want them to be to be awake. I want them to see the world the way that it really is. No, you want them to see the world the way that you really see it, but not necessarily the way that it really is. Nostalgia. There's that one person who everything reminds you of them. Not even necessarily the other way around. You can be sad about it, or you can kind of remember those positive aspects about it. It's a choice. It's a hard choice. It's a really difficult choice. I hear people say, like, you have to choose to be happy. Okay. We talked about that day before yesterday, right? And to choose peace. You just gotta let go of the past. Good luck. Good luck. That's really hard to do. And we do a disservice when we treat it flippantly, like somehow it's easy to do. Of course it's not easy to do. If it was easy to do, everyone would do it. Everyone would do it. And so it isn't a matter of letting things go. It's about recognizing that 9/11 can be tragic, and there's some funny stuff about it. Death is tragic, and there's some funny stuff about it. Nostalgia is tragic, and there's some funny stuff about it. It's both. It's both. When you only recognize one, you only experience half of it. Experience the full thing, and you'll realize that just like life, most things in life are both tragic and funny. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms?